Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days. Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days. Waiver gems and trade block plays. Win today and plan for days.
Win your league, stack that bread, or start a boom and lose instead. Sunday Surefire, let's go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sunday Surefire podcast. I'm your host, the Commish. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Downtown Brown.
Hey.
And my other co-host, Ethan Weaver.
Commish, how we doing?
Doing great, brother. Doing great. The NFL draft is winding down on us. We are the 7th round selections. The last few of them are being made at the moment. So we figured this was no better time than ever than right now to go ahead and give you guys a 2-round mock draft using a Superflex tight end premium format. We're going to be doing it full PPR for the receivers and running backs, and for the tight ends it'll be 1.75 premium. So this is very much raw. The draft, like I said, is concluding as we do this. So there's not really a quote unquote consensus out there yet, which makes this a really fun time to do this mock draft. And kind of the interesting thing about it, once you get to the late first, early second round, it really quickly becomes like a flavor of the month type of thing. Whatever your taste is in particular, that's the player you're going to go with. So I think that's going to be a theme that continues throughout draft season. And I'm looking forward to running down this mock here, guys. So we're going to be doing it. We each pick every third pick or so. We're going to be talking about a player that was selected in the last couple of days, and let's just run through it, boys. 101, hit me with it.
101. Very, very much chalk. Jeremiah Love, running back to the Arizona Cardinals at the 3rd pick in the NFL draft. Not much to belabor here. He's a very, very good prospect, very, very good capital. He's going to get opportunity, even though it might be a little murky year one with Algier, James Conner there. He's going to be the long-term RB1 stud for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yep, we've been saying it, pretty much chalk pick here. I'll go ahead and just move on here. If I was selecting from the 2nd position, and I'm gonna go, I guess, which could be considered another chalk pick with a super flex. I'm gonna go Fernando Mendoza here, again, the QB1 for the Raiders. He's gonna go right off the board quick. I happen to need QB in many of my leagues, and I would not be too ashamed of drafting him here.
No, not at all. It's Superflex format. You need a quarterback. It's a lot easier to click the button on a guy like Mendoza at the 102 than it is to try to trade for an established starter. So I got no issues at all, especially in a vacuum exercise like this where team needs don't come into play. No problem. I'll take him as the 102. From 103, I was up. I just went ahead and grabbed, I think what many people consider to be the top wide receiver on the board in Carnell Tate, who was selected with the 4th pick in the draft to the Tennessee Titans. Just gives Cam Ward another weapon to throw the ball to. The guys that are on the roster right now, and Calvin Ridley, Wan'Dale Robinson, Gunnar Helm, if you want to put his name up there as a target earner, really aren't guys that I see being in his way, quote unquote, in the long run. So I think there's a real chance he leads this team in targets as a rookie. And I think, if he hits his ceiling the way a lot of people project him to, myself included, he's going to be a very relevant dynasty asset for a long time to come. Wouldn't even hate taking him at the 102 if you're in a Superflex league, if you're all set at quarterback and you can't trade out to get a good haul. I'm drafting here back-to-back, so it's me again here. 104, Jordan Tyson. The 108 in the NFL draft to the New Orleans Saints, slots in behind Chris Olave as the number 2 pass catcher in that offense for his rookie season, which I kind of like. I kind of like the idea of him hitting the NFL with a little bit of a mentor here with Olave in front of him, and also a guy who's going to be dealing with the other opposition's top coverage. So give him an opportunity to ease into his role in the NFL, but also attached to a innovative offensive mind in Kellen Moore, who's going to get the most out of his skill set. You don't draft a receiver in the top 10 not to utilize him. So I really like this pick, and it's a big win for Tyler Shuck as well. It's giving him another weapon to throw the ball to.
Yeah, I like it. I like those 2 picks, and I'm kind of sandwiched here in the middle between you two. Here I had the privilege to have the 5th pick here, and I went with pretty much taking the big 3 here. The big 3 come off the board, right in a row with 2, 3, or 3, 4, 5. My pick was Makai Lemon at the 105. I think I mentioned earlier on our live reaction that he's going to get he's going to get used early and often in the Philadelphia offense once we learn that that AJ Brown trade is going to be approaching, right? So I think Lemon's going to be involved quite a bit in that offense. So I'm pretty comfortable grabbing him as a top 5 pick right after Tyson and Tater off the board.
Yeah, this is pretty much chalk. These 5 players in the top 5, especially these 3 receivers in a row here. Obviously, in a vacuum, this is probably how it should go. Depending on team need, I could see Mendoza potentially falling if the 102 Dynasty manager doesn't necessarily need a quarterback, because Tate, Tyson, and Lemon, they're both high quality prospects with good capital there. So that brings me to the 1-6, and I'm going to lean into the format here and go Kenyon Sadiq, drafted by the New York Jets at pick 16 in the first round, tight end out of Oregon, and obviously blew up the combine. I wasn't going to let this landing spot deter me too much from Sadiq. I was going to lean in with the talent and the format of this draft. I know it's going to be a little messy in New York. Obviously, they drafted Omar Cooper at pick 30 later in the first round. They have Garrett Wilson there. They don't really have a stable quarterback in Geno Smith. So there's a lot of bodies. Mason Taylor was drafted last year in the second round. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use Sadiq. But as I said, the talent is evident. The draft capital is great. So I wasn't going to let a poor landing spot deter me from pushing the button at the 1-6 on Sadiq. I also had the 1-7, and I went Jadarian Price here. And this is where I think the draft kind of starts. I would say some would say even starts the 1-6, depending on format. I think Sadiq's a little chalky within the 175 premium, but I could definitely see people going in a different direction than Price. I leaned into the draft capital. Do I necessarily think Price was a first-round talent at the running back position? Maybe not, but he is, because he was drafted in the first round by the Seattle Seahawks at pick 32, running back out of Notre Dame. Loves a running mate there, but he's obviously going to have a huge opportunity early on in the season with Zach Charbonnet nursing that ACL injury. So he may have the majority of the backfield to himself and could establish himself as the main guy early and continue throughout the season until Charbonnet is back and healthy, and maybe you see that two-headed monster with as we saw the last few years with Walker and Charbonnet. But a first-round running back that capital is hard to ignore. So I went Price here at the 1-7.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with these 7 picks. I think, as we were doing this live, I probably would have went Price here. So this is where I kind of had to make another decision. I actually, with the 1-8, I went KC Concepcion. Similar reasons with Price. I think, getting that first round capital with the Browns. I think he's got to make an impact. And the capital proves it. They need wide receivers. So I was comfortable grabbing KC Concepcion here. Happy to see how early he went in the draft in that talent. So, you should get a good variety of ways to get involved in the offense. So I went KC here at 108.
Yeah, I got no problem with Concepcion. The first round capital speaks for itself, and I think there's going to be a role for him there. And I trust Todd Monken enough to scheme up touches for his first round pick. If anything, he might be a dump off option for whoever wins that quarterback battle. So even if the QB plays a little bit ugly, I think there's enough meat on the bone there for Concepcion to be fantasy relevant, at least somewhat as a rookie, and then long term more upside with a better quarterback going forward. With the 109, I also leaned into the tight end premium format. I grabbed Eli Stowers off the board. He was the 22nd pick in the second round of the NFL draft. Lands in a good spot behind Dallas Goedert in year one. With Goddard, he's been a solid tight end for the Eagles for a while now, but he's coming off a career season, at least in terms of touchdowns scored. But the Eagles still didn't really show a ton of faith in him and when the offseason hit. You would think coming off a big year that they would sign him to a longer-term extension, but they waited until he hit free agency to even have those negotiations. And even then, they let it drag off like like 10 days to 2 weeks after the start of free agency before they decided to bring him back, aching him to just a 1 year extension for 26. So this pick feels like a situation where they want to be a year ahead at their replacement, kind of like they were when they drafted Goddard all those years ago when they still had Zach Ertz on the roster. But I think the turnaround time to hand the baton over to Stowers is just going to be that, just 1 year. And who knows? Maybe Goddard shows his age now that he's 31 years old, breaks down, and maybe Stowers is on the field sooner rather than later. So I just see the future of this Philadelphia offense being Jalen Hurts throwing the ball to Devonta Smith, Mekhi Lemon, and Eli Stowers is kind of the big three there in Philly. So I was happy to scarf him up here in a premium format at the 109. The 110, going to Superflex here. And I didn't think a couple of days ago I'd be making this pick. I would admittedly not the biggest Ty Simpson fan in the world, but just based on the way the rest of the draft panned out and the capital that an investment he got from the Rams going pick 13 overall, it's hard to ignore that in here in the Superflex league. So if it's a late first round pick, maybe you're a contender and you're hanging on to a later first round pick and you're able to kind of make a little bit of a luxury pick and you have the ability to wait out some other teams and be patient with Simpson before he gets his opportunity a year or two from now, then this could be a guy who pays dividends for you down the road. And if anything, a lot of other guys in this group feel like guys that you're going to draft and they're going to be declining assets. I think Simpson's just the opposite of that, where you draft him and then everyone knows that one day he's going to be the guy and get his opportunity. So as time goes on with the unknown, like I feel like he's going to be a guy that increases in value as the day where he becomes a starting quarterback gets closer. So, like I said, wasn't a big fan of the guy as a prospect, but I just can't put to the side everything else that I saw with him, and the draft capital makes a big difference in this case. So, went Ty Simpson at the 110.
Yeah, I like that call. I like him at the 110. I ended up, picking right after you again at the 111. Never would I thought would I go double Browns receivers, but I actually went Denzel Boston at the 11th pick here with Cleveland. Again, I think, if you're in this position and if you do see Simpson go right before, you're kind of right back at the well here where you can see, an impact year one. I think, Boston, you should carve out a role for him, being the big body receiver with consumption, maybe being a gadget / slot guy as well. I have no problem getting Boston out of the first round. So that's the direction I went here with moving up for Boston at the 11th pick.
Yeah, no, not too much argument in the last few picks. At the 112, I went Omar Cooper, and I leaned into the draft capital with the New York Jets, picking him at pick 30, first round wide receiver. So I understand that New York is not a very good spot. It's pretty crowded, as I kind of alluded to when I was talking about Sadiq. You have Mason Taylor, Sadiq, Garrett Wilson, Omar Cooper, and you don't really have a quarterback. So Geno Smith isn't going to be able to prop up all these weapons. To Kamish's point when he was talking about Ty Simpson is going to be an ascending asset because nobody expects anything from him. I think Denzel Boston, Omar Cooper, and a lot of these guys in this draft, unfortunately, we're going to be at the end of next NFL season, and their stock is probably going to go down quite a bit just because they're not going to have much counting stats on their resume because of the situations they're in. So Omar Cooper and Boston are probably more expensive now than they're going to be a year from now. So I think that's going to be a continuous theme, unfortunately, with this draft class. That brings me to the 201. And again, I leaned heavily in the draft capital. It was hard to ignore. Pick 33. I went Stribling here, and who was the first pick in the second round by the San Francisco 49ers. And he was not on my bingo card to be the first player taken in the second round, almost a first round pick. But I mean, the guy has size and athleticism, and he's going to be guaranteed opportunity. That's why the NFL draft is such a big piece of the puzzle, because it tells us what these NFL teams think of these players, and it's a direct correlation to the opportunity they're going to get in the NFL. And Stribling going at pick 33. He's going to get an opportunity to make plays for the 49ers. Mike Evans is probably not long for the 49ers, so it should open up in a year or so for him. So it's very unexpected, one of the more surprising picks in the NFL draft, and I can't believe I took him at the 201 in my Dynasty rookie mock. It definitely wasn't expected, but Stribling here at the 2-1.
Yeah, I can't really fault you here at the 2-1 because everything past this, I felt we can, we'll probably start hearing a reoccurring theme here where you can start putting a lot of these guys in this murky bubble here where your second round, there's a lot all up in the air right now. I decided to, I guess, make a jump a little bit in draft value, but a guy that I kind of like better in this process. And at the 2-2, I went Chris Bell with Miami getting drafted there. Yes, he did have a counterpart with Douglas that got drafted a little bit before him. But I think Bell is, he's a chain mover. He's one of those guys that can get the catch, get a little bit of yak afterwards too. And I think that's probably something that Malik's going to need more than, maybe just a deep threat, right? He's not really going to be taking a whole lot of shots, I wouldn't think, in that offense. So I kind of like Bell here. I think he can rack up a lot of PPR points next year, but I took a little bit of a leap here, but I went Bell at the 2-2.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that was that much of a leap, honestly. I have him in a similar tier, and I think Miami got a great value on Bell slipping into the third round, and I think this is pretty good value for him at this range of Superflex drafts. Obviously the big bugaboo with him is that he's coming off an ACL injury that he suffered in December of last season, so his outlook for 2026 is murky at best, but he's landing in a spot where there's ample opportunity for targets both in the short term and in the distant future as well. So I think this is a really good spot. I think we're getting close to a teardrop with some of these guys. So getting a guy right here that was projected by many to be a borderline first-round NFL draft pick prior to his injury, I think this is a pretty safe pick you can make considering what the rest of the board looks going from there. Which brings me to the 203. I drafted Jonah Coleman of the Denver Broncos. He was drafted with the 8th selection in the 4th round. You usually don't like taking guys, 4th, 5th round capital this early in the top 15 picks of a Superflex draft, but welcome to 2026, everybody. That's what we're facing with. So I went Coleman because I know that Sean Payton likes to use multiple running backs. J.K. Dobbins is long in the tooth and on a 1-year contract effectively. So he's going to be an opportunity for him this season and beyond. I think the ideal tandem is Jonah Coleman and RJ Harvey in some type of a timeshare. Both guys can catch the football. Both guys can run the football. So it's going to be a little bit of a back and forth type of approach. But if, down the line, one of them ever gets injured, then we kind of see a little bit more of what Harvey looked like down the stretch of the 2025 campaign where he was very fantasy productive. So going to be a good offense too under Sean Payton for a while as well. So not overly concerned about that. 4th round capital nowadays is fine for a running back. So when a guy had as a top 5 back as a prospect and grabbed him here to round out the top 15 in this exercise. And I'm on the clock here again at the 204. And I'm just grabbing one of my favorite guys in this tier. I mean, I pretty much from this point forward, it's a lot of just pick the guy that you like. And a guy that I really like is Ted Hurst out of Georgia State. Small school product, finished just shy of 2,000 total receiving yards over the last 2 seasons. Granted, smaller program, sure, that's fair enough, but the Buccaneers felt confident using a 3rd-round pick on him. And when I project out just one season, I see Chris Godwin moving on to a different landing spot, or if he's even still playing after this current season. And I see Emeka Egbuka as the top wideout on this Buccaneers team, but that number 2 spot in Baker Mayfield's offense is very much up for grabs in my estimation. I mean, it's Jalen McMillan, Tez Johnson, and then now Ted Hurst joining the fold. So if I got to put my chips on one of those 3 players to ascend and become a reliable WR2 in this offense, an offense that has shown for years and years now that they can support multiple fantasy relevant wide receivers, then my money would be on Ted Hurst to win the job of those guys. And he might even, chip away at Godwin's playing time, depending on how this upcoming season goes. And so, while we're already in get your guy territory here at the 204, I had to start with Ted Hurst to get my guy.
Yeah, I definitely like Ted Hurst. He's kind of one I've been tracking, and it's one where, it's one just, grab a guy you like. They may be buried at first year one. With my 2.5, I kind of went the other direction where I kind of was scanning, depth charts to see, who can fill in rather quickly, who can make an impact in this upcoming season. And I went Karen Branch at the fifth, or I'm sorry, Zachariah Branch at the 205 here, landing with Atlanta here. After Mooney going to the Giants, kind of does leave um, a spot to fill at that WR2 or WR2 spot for Atlanta. So I think Branch has a chance, to run routes alongside London as that, two wide receiver in Pitt. So I kind of went more depth chart route here to see, okay, who can maybe carve out a role early, because this gets a little foggy. So that's kind of the direction I went here with Branch at the 205.
Yeah, Branch definitely has a lot of opportunity. I think he's going to probably easily become the wide receiver 2 there in short order. And that brings me to 2-6. And I went to the land of opportunity and with this pick and the Miami Dolphins and drafted Caleb Douglas. All he has to do for a starting position this year is to beat out the following: Malik Washington, Jalen Tolbert, and Tutu Atwell. I think he's probably going to do just that. At least 2 of the 3. That is, big bodied guy, 6'3.5", 206 pounds, and fairly athletic. But the key word here is opportunity. A guy who ran a 4.39, so big and with some speed. I think he has the physical tools to obviously carve a role on this team, and the depth chart being kind of barren. He's going to have every opportunity to be a starter on this team for Malik Willis. He was the first weapon drafted in this draft by the Miami Dolphins. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I know Chris Bell was taken earlier in this mock. I know a lot of people like Chris Bell. I think Chris Bell would have been drafted higher in the NFL draft if he didn't have that late season injury. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Miami Dolphins wide receiver depth chart plays out. That brings me to my next pick, the 2-7, and I went Chris Brazzell, wide receiver, drafted by the Carolina Panthers out of the University of Tennessee. And I know we said it earlier, but almost all of these receivers can be mixed and matched. It's whoever you like better on that day, draft that player. It's just one of those second rounds in 2026. But Brazzell, he's 6'4" and runs a 4.37. His opportunity on the Carolina Panthers depth chart, obviously Xavier Legette, I would say is probably a failed experiment in the first round by the Panthers. You have Jalen Coker there, but a guy with Brazzell, with that kind of size and speed, I think can create a role for himself. Pick 19, 80 in the third round, 83rd overall, so top 100 capital. I just like to take the shot, throw the dart on a guy with that kind of athleticism, that kind of size, and in a place where there is some opportunity. So Chris Brazzell, 207.
Yeah, like I said, it's quite the wide receiver run, and I'm not even going to stop this trend here at the 2.8. Either taking Antonio Williams, and again, I'm kind of whenever I'm not too sure which direction I want to go in my rookie draft. Like I said, I'm just a depth chart looker, right? Where I say, okay, how can they? Same thing as I said earlier, where can with Branch, can Antonio Williams carve out a role early? And I like that. Even if he's not a long-term asset, I just like guys that are involved because maybe somebody else falls in love with him and you can end up trading him, right? So I just like guys that you can envision getting playing time early on. And I think Antonio Williams can, with the aging, scary Terry, and they really don't have that many options beyond that after Debo's departure as well. So I want Antonio Williams at the 208 here.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. A big fan of the player, and I'm a big fan of the landing spot. So you get into the late second round of these drafts, and you have opportunity lining up with what's considered to be a really promising up and coming quarterback who showed up really well in his first season when he was fully healthy. That he can lead a high scoring offense. So opportunity in the short term in 2026 and beyond with Lauren's age, as you mentioned. So no problem at all taking him there at the where you're guiding with the 208. Getting into the 209, we got one more guy to keep going on this wide receiver run. That's Jeremy Bernard. Went to Pittsburgh in the drafts, ended up being as the 15th pick in the second round. So to leave a receiver here in the late second still on the board that was drafted in the second round of the NFL draft, I just couldn't pass up on the capital that was invested in him. He's another guy that I wasn't overly enthralled with throughout the scouting process. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite player by any means, but you think about guys like DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. They both make a decent chunk of change money wise. I'm not necessarily sold that both those guys are going to be in Pittsburgh for the long run. So Bernard, as a young player, could carve out a role for himself because I think he does kind of factor in a little bit more as a slot option versus Pittman. DK, just based on stylistically, he did line up there just under 40% of the time last season. So he does have it in his game a little bit to do it. So I think if he's going to have a path in 2026, it's probably got to be there with the two bigger body receivers playing on the outside. But we'll see how Bernard pans out. This is kind of just a shot on the draft capital that an NFL team invested in him. And with my next one here, Aaron, I know this one's going to make you pretty happy as the resident Chiefs fan in the room here. I'm finally going to get another running back taken in this draft here. I'm going to go Emmett Johnson of the Kansas City Chiefs, who's one of my favorite guys to scout. Just looking at him as a pro, I just said, like, this guy looks like an NFL pro running back. And the Chiefs agree with me in making him a 5th-round pick. That's a little bit later maybe than we would have wanted, but it's not the end of the world necessarily for a running back. They obviously have a lot of money invested in Kenneth Walker, but this team has wanted to use multiple backs in the past. You could argue maybe they've done that out of necessity, really the last 5 or 6 years. But I do think there's going to be times where Kenneth Walker needs a blow, and they clearly just weren't comfortable as Brashad Smith being the primary guy to do that. And Johnson's a guy who has a little bit of a 3-down skill set, who I believe doesn't necessarily have to come off the field on passing downs. And what do we know about Kenneth Walker? The guy doesn't stay healthy, especially when you give him that doesn't get better when you give him a larger workload. So I do think he's going to be spelled here and there, and I think Johnson has an opportunity to carve out a role for himself in this Chiefs offense. And if Walker goes down, if Johnson has that backup role solidified, look out. I mean, now all of a sudden he's the lead back in the Chiefs offense. That sounds pretty good for fantasy purposes to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, getting back on the running back, well, as soon as you can in the second round, I don't think Emmett Johnson is a bad one to choose there to get on that track, right? I think, as you said, where he can be a nice backup to Walker. I also, at this point in the draft, going to the 211, I was getting tired of wide receivers as well. I wanted to kind of switch paths too, and I went Carson Beck, try to go, for some upside as well, to looking at that future there in Arizona. Can he carve out a starting role after the Jacoby years? That's kind of what you're hoping for, and all the same, conversation, we have with Ty Simpson. I think Ty Simpson is a better prospect, but again, at one point in time, Carson Beck was the number one rated QB in this class. So, I mean, he can emerge back as a potentially as a top QB in years to come. I mean, look at some of these guys like Darnold and guys like that too. So I want to take a stab, get away from the wide receiver position a little bit, and grabbed Carson Beck.
Yeah, Carson Beck, I definitely see the upside in this pick here. There's opportunity in Arizona. He was the first pick in the 3rd round. So not terrible capital, better than I thought he was going to get. So in a round full of 3rd-round receivers, why not take a shot on Beck, a quarterback that potentially obviously can gain some value if given the opportunity this year to start some games. Brissett, he's in some contract disputes trying to get some somewhat starter level money. Gardner Minshew is also on the roster. So it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. So with the last pick in this 2-round mock, I went Jacoby Lane, wide receiver, drafted by the Baltimore Ravens, pick 16 in the 3rd round, 80th overall, and another big-bodied receiver with a lot of explosion. He's 6'4", ran like a 4.47, 40+ inch vert, so a very explosive athlete. And the opportunity awaits for him in Baltimore. Rashad Bateman failed 1st-round experiment. he isn't it. And outside Zay Flowers, it's basically him and Mark Andrews. So Jacoby Lane has every opportunity to ascend as the wide receiver 2 in that offense. He has a lot of upside with his side speeds and his explosion. But the NFL, so you look at this mock draft and you see all the third round receivers, all these receivers here, and the NFL kind of like agrees how similar these prospects are, because they were all kind of bunched right there in the middle of the third round. So it's going to be interesting to see which one of these receivers actually takes off for our fantasy teams. Hopefully more than 50%, but we all know how the second, third rounds can be, sometimes even the back end of the first in these kind of subpar drafts. It's a lot of dart throws, a lot of hopium, and we'll see soon enough if these guys can play in the NFL. But definitely a tougher exercise right off the rip than I would have expected. Just the NFL draft didn't do us too many favors here for the 2026 rookie class.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The second, especially the second half of the second round gets tricky pretty quick. So it's really, like I was saying throughout the draft, it's kind of just like a pick your flavor, like figure out the guys that are your guys. And if the pick comes up on the clock and you can't trade back or trade out to a future year for a decent haul, just get your guy take it with confidence and hope he pans out. That's really the best you can do in these exercises, particularly when you get into ranges of any draft, so that essentially the road ahead is uncertain. You just kind of lead into your process and trust your gut here. Aaron, any last second thoughts on the draft as a whole before you wrap it up?
No, I mean, I guess we'll wait and see. We'll see, this time next year for eating some of our words. But I think as of right now, some of the stuff's pretty foggy. I mean, we didn't know wide receivers had some depth, but the elite talent does drop off fairly quickly. So we're trying to see who are these serviceable guys in the second and third rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, this is a really fun exercise. It was a great time covering the draft. If you want more in-depth analysis on the players that were drafted and where they were drafted and all that, there is a episode out there as well. You can find, hit the subscribe button and then kind of just go back and look at our draft coverage that we did live. So a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of good stuff in here, folks. We'll be doing more mocks throughout the off season, and we'll get into veteran winners and losers of the NFL draft as well. So a lot coming down the pike. But until next time, folks, peace.